It's a Week 17 preview with the playoff odds. Welcome to the Boxing Day edition of the FTN Fantasy Schatz and Tanier NFL podcast. I'm Aaron Schatz. You know me as the DVOA guy from FTN Fantasy. He is Mike Tanier. You know him from his Substack, The Two Deep Zone, at miketanier.substack.com. Happy holidays. Happy Boxing Day. Happy day after blowout day.
On Boxing Day, the last are supposed to be first. Like the servants are supposed to get served by the masters and things like that. That didn't happen in the AFC. That did not happen yesterday.
No. So, well, let's start. For those, we take live, we're here 11 a.m. Mondays and Thursdays live on YouTube. Let's start by talking about yesterday's game. Finally, the big Chiefs win.
Yes.
This was a big, dominating win over a good opponent. Not a great opponent, but not a bad opponent. People online were like, what good opponent are you talking about? You know, the above average team that had a 10-5 record coming in, that's a good team. You want to be like, Russell Wilson is the worst quarterback who's ever played and whatever, but that's not true. And
zero memory. Those same guys were, Wilson is back, Russ is back, the Broncos made a mistake, maybe he deserves a $200 million. Same jokers were hitting you with that yesterday. Okay, fine, there's only 4 good teams in the NFL, right? It's not a good opponent unless it's the Bills or the Lions or the Eagles. Guess what? Or the Chiefs. They're the good opponent too.
Right. And the Chiefs finally get the big dominating win, and they've been on a roll the last 4 weeks, and it looks like they have, in fact, flipped the switch. And Hollywood Brown is a good addition, and everything is good for them. And then the Ravens went out there and were like, well, now let's make our statement.
2.0. I call this what happened in the last, 6 days, 5 days, the Christmas Invitational Tournament, because it was the same 4 teams.
Right.
And what happened in this is that the 2 teams who are the real teams, including the Ravens, who have to come from behind and had something to prove, dominated both times against the Steelers and Texans teams who are more like upstarts, who are there more questions about. And everybody told you over in this little mini tournament starting on Saturday who they really were.
Light that burns them from the sky says the Texans are the 2023 Jets. The offense sucks and the defense is great. Is their defense still number 1 after yesterday?
Good question.
I'm not sure, but my guess is no. But it's still very high. And I think the fact that the Texans offense has declined so much is a really interesting story. It can't all be the offensive line, but that's a large part of it. Yes. I don't know how much. I'm not a good enough film watcher of quarterbacks to decide whether Stroud himself has declined significantly or whether it's just that he's in a bad situation. But that offense fell apart this year.
Bad habits by Stroud have grown in. You can see some of the bad throws he made were off of his back foot, anticipating rushers who weren't there yet a few times, and that's a bad habit thing. Schematically, I know people were complaining about the scheme earlier in the season. It's like, I don't see it. Oh, my goodness, schematically. They were complaining about it on the broadcast yesterday. It's like, run some crossing routes. But
their screens are terrible.
Their screens are terrible. And they tried to run one. Rivers was complaining on the internet. Rivers McCown. They're trying to run them at the goal line. They're trying to run a swing pass with a blocker at the goal line. That gets stopped. They're terrible at screens. They're not good on early downs. And now they don't have Tank Dell, and it seems like everything has to go through Nico and Dalton Schultz.
The playoff odds after yesterday was really good for Kansas City. And here's why. Not only did they show themselves that maybe played their best game of the season because their offense has been much better recently, and their defense, which had declined in the second half of the season, played a very good game. But I think the bad situation for Kansas City was for the Steelers to win the AFC North.
Right.
Because that would have set up for the Ravens to probably win in the first round and then go to Kansas City, in which case Kansas City probably has to beat both the Ravens and the Bills to make the Super Bowl. Wow. Now it sets up for the Ravens to be at home in the first round. And if the Ravens and Bills both win, then they play each other.
The Ravens get to play the Bills while the Chiefs
Kansas City gets to play the Houston-Pittsburgh winner, both teams of which they've just destroyed in the last 2 weeks.
It's remarkable. It's remarkable how they put themselves in this position. And, you know, they flipped the switch. They also got guys healthy. It's not like how did they flip?
Yeah. And it's not like this makes playing Buffalo or Baltimore in the AFC Championship game any easier.
No, but
right? Like, I think that even if Kansas City has flipped the switch, it doesn't mean they're necessarily better than Buffalo and Baltimore. It just means they're not worse like they looked like for much of the season. Yeah. But the odds, as far as probabilities go, it's a lot easier to beat Buffalo or Baltimore than to beat Buffalo and Baltimore.
Yeah, it sounds like a freshman probability problem.
It is.
You got a 52% chance of winning either one of them, and you have to win both. You have to multiply your 52s by each other, 0.52s by each other, and it's a problem.
Before we start previewing the rest of Week 17, Mike Roosh has a question, which is another serious question for a very serious show. Given the Athletic article with Rodgers as the general manager and results against expectations, are the 2024 New York Jets having a Hall of Fame-worthy, hilarious season?
We wish Rodgers was a GM. It turns out there's a 20-year-old nitwit who's a GM of the team. We wish Rodgers was in charge. They'd be better.
If the 20-year-old nitwit is reading certain blogs online, he might be smarter than the actual GM.
Incorrect, because these 20-year-old nitwits read the blogs and fail to understand them.
Oh, well, that's a problem.
Yeah. Right, and I shared this with Rivka. It's like, just because someone is listening to you doesn't mean they actually understand what you're talking about, especially when they
reading comprehension test results. Yes,
yes, exactly. Especially when your name is Brick.
That's a real name for a real person.
Yes, it is not the weatherman and anchorman.
It is a very funny Jets season, and if you enjoy Jets Schadenfreude, it sets up, if you look at the AFC East going forward, the Jets look like the weakest of the four teams, because they're not going to likely have a top draft pick this year. And Rodgers is old and has gotten average, and they have to carry his salary, and they're not going to be able to get a real replacement.
Right.
Meanwhile, the Dolphins don't look great, but they still have, Tyreek Hill and Jayden Waddle, and the Patriots have this hot young quarterback, even if they have nothing else, and the Bills are the Bills.
Imagine the interview process trying to bring people into the Jets right now. The things that we learned about are things people did know about behind the scenes, certainly to a degree. But imagine Woody Johnson bringing somebody in to be GM, and you have to start asking questions. Well, do I answer to you? How much power do I have? Is there a bunch of teenagers going to be bringing their girlfriends into the locker room and telling me what to do? And who are you going to get to run this team that has a 40-year-old quarterback that you might have to cut as your first order of duty? It's terrible. It's terrible moving forward. It's hilarious, but it's terrible.
All right, let's talk about this weekend's games. We'll start with the Saturday Broncos at Bengals at 4 p.m. Now, this game has gotten a little less interesting thanks to Kansas City's win.
Okay.
Because Kansas City will likely sit its starters in Week 18 against the Broncos. Which means if the Broncos lose this game, but win in Week 18, I believe that at that point they're in.
Right.
Okay. So my playoff odds had the Broncos in with a win and 70% with a loss. Okay. But in reality, it's higher than that.
Correct.
Because that's not from the new. I did a new simulation today that expected the Chiefs to sit their starters in Week 18, and so now it's more like 90% with a loss.
Right. And
because they're going to play a team that's not playing their starters, and the Bengals are going to be at 1% even if they win this game. So this game has sort of lost a lot of its fun.
Right, and the Bengals are at 1% because of their tiebreaker situation, which is terrible, and the fact that both the Colts and Dolphins have ridiculous, silly schedules over the next couple of
weeks. If the Colts, basically if those teams all win out in order to make it to the playoffs, it's the Colts that win the tiebreaker.
Right. But this is still a playoff important game.
But it's mostly not. Because the Broncos are going to go out there against the Kansas. And then listen, these are professionals and they try hard. And I will always bring up the example of the 2004 Buffalo Bills, who are the best team ever to miss the playoffs by DVOA.
Okay.
All they had to do was beat Pittsburgh's backups, and they couldn't do it.
Right.
So it's certainly possible that Kansas City's back Wentz could go out there and be like, show out and beat the Broncos.
Right.
But this game has taken some of the fun.
Right. I don't know what to make of this late Bengals hot streak, which came against, Dorian Thompson-Robinson last week, the Titans in kind of a sloppy, messy back and forth the week before, and the Cowboys where they had a tough time beating them. They're in a 3-game winning streak against.
I feel like the winning streak is they're still playing the same way. Their defense is bad, their running game is okay, and their passing game is great. And that's the way it was when they were losing, and that's the way it is now that they're winning. And they have problems in the trenches, like those ESPN pass rush and pass block win rates. The Broncos are like top 5 in both, and the Bengals are near the bottom of the league in both. They don't block well and they don't rush the passer well, other than Trey Hendrickson.
Right, and they still have some injuries on the defensive line. Looks like they're not getting anybody back. Offensive line, they might be getting Orlando Brown back. I don't know how big a difference that makes, but it's got to help a little bit.
The Bengals are only 21st rushing, and the Broncos are the best run defense in the league. It's a much more even matchup with Joe Burrow, because Joe Burrow is Joe Burrow.
Joe Burrow is Joe Burrow, but get him into 3rd and 10, 3rd and 11. I know the Broncos are really good at getting stuffs too, and if you stuff him a couple times, you force him to do 3rd down heroic.
Right, and I can do DVOA and compare but remember, DVOA compares 3rd and 10s to other 3rd and 10s. So even if you're an above average team at 3rd and 10, you don't want to be in 3rd and 10, because above average at 3rd and 10 is not as good as being below average at 3rd and 2.
Absolutely. Makes sense.
Riley Moss is supposed to be back.
Yes.
He is an interesting player because by coverage DVOA, he is at the bottom of the league. Mm-hmm. But people who scout are very high on him.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's just because in avoiding Surtain, you have to throw at Moss and he's going to give up stuff because he's not Surtain, or if he's really not as good as people think. The surprising stat we bring up every time we talk about the Broncos is that the Broncos are 25th against number 1 wide receivers because they don't necessarily put Surtain on the opponent's number 1 and shut him down.
Right, and I think opponents have been moving guys around to find. I'm now blanking on the other.
Levi Wallace was cut this week, so Riley Moss and then Jaquan McMillan. And they're moving guys around to get to either Wallace or McMillan, having some success with that. So one of the things about Moss is he's significantly better than the guys he's replacing. So even if he doesn't necessarily put up good charting numbers, he's not. The Wallace against Cleveland a couple weeks ago was, particularly bad.
Yes, pretty clear.
Bengals are particularly weak against tight ends, but that's not really a Broncos strength. Adam Troutman.
Lucas Krull with the glaive. He's going to hit with the glaive. Krull.
All right, maybe you play your Lucas Krull over.
My Lucas Krull over in that game. In terms of overs, by the way, Broncos running backs are getting Jaleel McLaughlin fully healthy. He was banged up. They're also getting Tyler Bidet back, who's been out for weeks. They love rotating their running backs, so be very careful rushing any kind of overs for the running backs for the Broncos. You remember the Thursday night game? I think 4 different guys carried the ball in the first drive as Peyton tries to get these guys involved.
Yeah, I did Packers last Monday night, did Josh Jacobs and Emmanuel Wilson overs. Only one of those hit because they spread the ball around.
Yeah.
So Josh Jacobs went under, but Emmanuel Wilson went over.
And Wilson got over. You mentioned the Wilson over, and I was like, I like that one. Didn't play it. But
that one hit. But the Josh Jacobs over did not.
Yes.
The line is Bengals -3.
Oh, no, I'll take the Broncos. Thank you.
I think I'm taking the Broncos, even though they don't need to try as hard in this game. My guess is they don't need to try as hard, but not to the point where they're going to sit anybody.
Right.
Which means they're going to go out there and try, because the only people who don't try are the people who decide who's playing. Right. Once you put the players on the field, they're trying.
It's their career.
And I think the Broncos I'll take Broncos +3 in this one.
One other thing, forecast calls for rain on Saturday in Cincinnati. Rain
which favors the running games, which favors the Broncos.
Yeah, so I'm going to lean towards the Broncos on this one as the extra factor.
8 p.m. Saturday is the 7-8 Cardinals at the 9-6 Rams. The Rams are 99.9% with a win.
Huh.
They don't clinch.
Right.
I don't exactly know what's the series of things they need to not make it.
Right.
I think it has to do with If they lose in week 18 and Seattle wins their next 2 games, it goes to like a strength of victory or something.
Seattle, they face each other. Seattle and the Rams face in week 18.
Right. So if Seattle wins week 18 and Seattle wins this week, then it goes to strength of victory or something crazy.
Yeah.
68% with a loss, the Rams are.
Right.
The Cardinals won 41-10 in week 2, but of course that was a long time ago. It was when, the Rams did have their full complement of receivers in that game, but it was a long time ago.
I think somebody got hurt. I think Puka got hurt in that game.
Here's an very interesting split, and this is one of those splits that I can't explain. On second down, the Rams are 3rd passing and 28th running. But on third down, they're 3rd running and 26th passing.
That is a really weird split.
That is a really weird split, and not one that I can think of a way to explain in any way.
No. Now, their running game has improved over the last couple of weeks. I think that's
the Rams, you mean?
Rams.
Yes, definitely. And the Cardinals' run defense, by the way, has declined in recent weeks. It's 29th in the league since week 10.
Unbelievable. Got a couple of injuries to report. Rams' injury report is pretty light overall. Couple of things for the Cardinals. James Conner was limited in the imaginary Christmas practice with a knee injury that he suffered last week. Trey Benson, his backup, was also limited, and the Cardinals rely on their running game. 2 linebackers out for the Cardinals: Mac Wilson, who Patriots fans probably know very well, and Baron Browning, who came over from the Broncos.
He's an edge rusher.
He's an edge, more of a linebacker, right? The Cardinals called up a linebacker from the practice squad. I think it was an off-ball guy, which seems to be an indication they're worried Mac Wilson will be out against a team that likes to put the middle of the field in a bind. Are you there? Or did you freeze? Ladies and gentlemen, if you are watching live, Aaron has finally froze. You probably have watched him breaking up along the way.
Am I back?
You're back.
Okay. Spectrum had some problems yesterday, so hopefully we're not.
You're a little wobbly today. And you're out again. You are out again, sir. We're going to wait and let the dead air run as Aaron tries to solve the problem here. Anyway, as I was saying, the Cardinals are anticipating probably that they're going to be without Mac Wilson. I don't think that that's a very good sign against the Rams.
Sorry, am I back now?
You are back audibly, but you are still a frozen.
Okay, this is really I apologize. I think that Spectrum is having internet problems. It's outside my control, unfortunately.
Well, we can muddle through. I think we should.
All right. The line is Rams -7.
No,
I go Cardinals.
I'm going Cardinals. They have nothing to play for, agree, but they're playing for jobs and careers and pride and things like that. And that 7-point spread is too much for a Rams team that has a pretty high variance level overall, even accounting for the fact that early in the year everyone was hurt.
Let's move on to Sunday.
Yes.
Now, we're not going to talk about this game that much, but 4-11 Panthers at 8-7 Bucs is important because Bucs.
Yes.
Right? Buccaneers are in 81% of the time if they win, 21% if they lose.
Yep.
Buccaneers won 26-23 in overtime just 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
When Chuba Hubbard fumbled in overtime, and then Rachaad White had a 38-yard run, and that set up the field goal, and the Buccaneers escaped with a win in Carolina. Now the game is in Tampa. The Panthers have improved to being 18th passing the ball and 8th running the ball since week 10. And Tampa Bay is still better than them at both.
Right. Well, yes. Tampa Bay is a pretty solid team overall. Panthers are not an easy out at all anymore. Not even close to being an easy out. They're very tough, scrappy spoilers. They did that to the Cardinals last week. Secretly, we can talk about Bryce Young if you want. They don't really have any playmakers except Chuba and Thielen. Offensive line is very good. Offensive line has been playing well, really, since the return of Bryce Young and kind of the recognition how they need to do things. They've been getting good protection and good run blocking from that line.
I went looking for specific weaknesses that might favor the Panthers. The Buccaneers are really weak against tight ends and running backs as receivers, and Tommy Tremble had 77 yards 4 weeks ago. I mean, there's not a lot of things that stand out, and in particular, Bryce Young is 31st in DVOA against the blitz this year, and Tampa Bay is Tampa Bay.
You can force throwaways from him, and that's one of the things you'll see. He's good at escaping. He does take some sacks. He just has to bail on some of these plays, and I think that Bowles is probably looking at that as an opportunity. A couple of things to monitor on the injury report. For the Panthers, J.C. Horn has been playing through a hip injury. Obviously, they're CB1, but he's expected to play. Right tackle Tyler Moton, we just talked about their offensive line. He's expected to play through a knee injury. Bucs injury report, tight end Cade Otton, sounds like he's out.
Yeah, he's been out the last couple of weeks.
He's been out. And Antoine Winfield, top cornerback, usually plays in the slot, has been out for a couple of weeks. He would not have practiced yesterday on Christmas had they practiced yesterday on Christmas. So those are a couple of concerns.
Line is Buccaneers -8.
Too much
The
delay.
system makes no pick.
Interesting. I think it's too much delay.
So you're the same, similar to Cardinals +7. You like Panthers +8 because they're trying.
They're trying. There's these teams that are not that good, that are playoff caliber teams in the NFC, but are not that good. The Rams, Bucs, Falcons don't really qualify. And I can't advocate for like giving them touchdown spreads.
The pick I actually kind of like, even though the Panthers defense is terrible, is under 49.5.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe the Panthers are still very field goal settle for team at this point. You know, if they get to about the 25-yard line, they're almost playing for a field goal. So yeah, I could see it taking that under.
All right. Now the best game of the weekend, 4 p.m. 11-4 Packers, 13-2 Vikings. Both teams are in the playoffs. Packers make the Super Bowl 22% if they win, 19% if they lose. Vikings make the Super Bowl 15% if they win, 8% if they lose.
Okay.
And line for this game is interesting. Some places have Packers -1, some have Vikings -1, some have.
Interesting. Well, the house knows what we know is that the Packers have been playing outstanding football.
Outstanding. Fantastic over the last 6 or 7 weeks. Absolutely. Their Packers defense has been better than the Vikings defense since midseason.
Amazing.
Even without Jair Alexander for most of those games.
Right. And Alexander would have practiced yesterday. It sounds like it's a very important addition for the Packers to get Alexander back against this receiving core.
Here's a fun stat from the FTN Stats Hub, which you should subscribe to. And by the way, we're having a Christmas sale, 15% off with code Holiday Edge. Code Holiday Edge. Sam Darnold is 3rd in the league against man coverage, and Jordan Love is 4th in the league against man coverage.
Okay.
And in frequency of man coverage, these teams are 30th and 32nd.
Well, the Vikings don't run a ton of man.
Right. Both of these teams run a lot of zone against quarterbacks that are better against man. But against zone, Darnold is 21st and Love is 9th.
Interesting.
So that would seem to favor the Packers.
It does favor the Packers. Because, I mean, I don't want to necessarily do what Brian Flores does against Jordan Love, where you send these big blitzes and have guys dropping into zones. I don't necessarily want to do that against Jacobs, against the quick game, or against Love just being able to work underneath these guys who are trying to drop back into zones, you know, from the A gap or wherever they're coming from.
Yes. I also point out when the Packers are on defense, pressure is very important to them. They are 2nd in defense with pressure and 16th without pressure. I mean, pressure is important to everybody. Everybody's better with pressure, but comparatively, they're better with pressure.
Right, and that's a team that tries to get pressure from a lot of guys. There's no T.J. Watt on that team, so it's like they rotate guys, they try to get it from the inside, etc. And you can pressure Darnold. One of the weaknesses of the Vikings offense is they give up a lot of sacks.
Yes, they do. The game is so. Let's pick it based on the idea of a pick 'em, because -1 or +1, it doesn't matter, right? Like.
Right.
The Packers are just playing so well in the last few weeks that I would have to take the Packers even in Minnesota. But it's a really good close game.
It's a tight one, and the Vikings' home field advantage, I think, in terms of how much noise that crowd generates, how many false starts and things like that they seem to get at home, how they seem to sometimes get more pass interference penalties at home, possibly because the crowd is, you know, causing.
They have a lot of pass interference penalties this year. Jefferson and Addison has 3 really long ones.
Yeah, some Professor X mind games being played with the refs by the crowd a little bit. I'm going to lean toward the Vikings in this one.
All right, so we have separate picks on that one.
Yes.
Do with that what you will if you are betting. We'll finish up with the 8 p.m. game, which is the 8-7 Falcons at the 10-5 Commanders. Falcons are in 81% with a win, 23% with a loss. Commanders are in 100% with a win, 81% with a loss. The whole game to me comes down to how good do you think Michael Penix is? We really don't know. We have one game to go on where the stats weren't great, but the scouting was. Yes. These teams are very similar quality on defense. They are, which is a bad.
Bad sign, yeah.
They are very similar quality running the ball, which is good.
Yes, both can run.
So the difference is that Washington has been a much better passing offense, but not as good in the second half of the season.
Right.
But we don't know what Michael Penix is. So comparing them doesn't make any sense because you're comparing what Cousins, and Cousins isn't playing.
Right. And you're comparing one game where it's like, oh, yeah, those were a couple of nice throws versus a season of rookie of the year level, high caliber play. One problem with the Commanders defense right now, guess who's back on the injury report? Our old friend Marshawn Lattimore, who had a very eventful game against the Eagles. He pulled a hamstring. He would not have practiced on Christmas. That's the bad news. I think he was making a pretty significant difference for the Commanders defense.
Even with the DPIs.
Yes.
Even with clearly their best cornerback.
Yes. He saved the game with the 2-point conversion stop against the Saints a couple weeks ago, then turned around and poked the ball loose a couple times from A.J. Brown in that game. So even with the DPIs, he was being very helpful. Good news. We thought it was good news last week for the Commanders. Looks like it's good news this week. Jonathan Allen is practicing. He should be out there. I have a feeling they're slow rolling it because Jerzon Newton has been playing real well next to Daron Payne. They haven't been real worried about their defensive tackle.
Do we want to call him Jerzon or do we want to call him Johnny?
I like Johnny.
He's Jerzon, Johnny Newton.
When he was on Krypton, he was Jerzon. But when he came to Earth and went to Kansas, he became Johnny.
All right. Washington's third down offense is third. Atlanta's third down defense is 31st.
I hate that I have to probably root for Kenny Pickett on Sunday. And then if that goes sideways, I have to root for the Falcons. I hate this. This is awful.
Michael Penix is easier to root for.
Yeah, he's
young guy. Go for it.
Bijan, just lots of Bijan. Yeah, but, Kyle Pitts.
One other thing I'm going to point about this game, Washington has a big special teams advantage. They are 6th in special teams. Atlanta is 29th. Their biggest advantage is in punts and kick returns.
They had a couple of good returns against the Eagles. I didn't notice their punter. And the Falcons have had kicker issues.
Tressway has been good for years, so that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. Tressway's
been good, for punting the ball. And Atlanta's okay punt returning, but mostly it's the Tressway is good.
Right. And Younghoe Koo's been out for a while, and they've had other kickers in there, and I think that's been an issue.
The line is Commanders -4. And this one, I'm taking the Commanders.
Okay.
I mean, there's no trying to do the mathematics on this is tough because we just don't know who Penix is right now.
No, and we know this. The first game bump for a rookie with his customized game plan. We know that tends to fade. Now now it's a big night game. It's a tough opponent. It's a do or die situation. We might not see the same guy.
And the freak says hit the over, and I agree. Over 47.5.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I don't bet Falcons games.
These defenses are bad. Are bad. Hey.
These defenses are bad. Kyle Pitts is going to bat another touchdown pass away, and that's how it's going to go under.
We have a couple of questions about tonight. We didn't preview tonight's game between Seattle and Chicago. I think Seattle.
Yeah, take Seattle. The Bears are demoralized at this point. I mean, I know they played tough in the second half last week. They're a team that's just kind of going out there, very much going through the motions. Defense is still okay. Offense is just discombobulated. Coaching staff is like 2 guys. The Seahawks are going to win.
And Era Today 17 says, who do you think is currently the most valuable player? You got me too late on this. I think we're close enough to the end that I can't talk about it. But here's who I think should be on the list of 5.
Okay.
Joe Burrow.
Okay, that's fair. You know what
I think there is a place for Joe Burrow in your 5 votes, despite the fact that the Bengals have a losing record. he has carried that team. They would be 3-13 without him.
You know what he's a shoe-in for right now?
I do.
You know how I feel about that.
I know. But he is a shoe-in.
Sam Darnold's not allowed to win Comeback Player of the Year, guys. We have to give.
They need to have a new award. They need to have a most improved player would be Sam Darnold easily.
And I saw you again. This is probably for your list of 5, talking up Penei Sewell and talking a little bit about Joe Thuney earlier on Blue Sky.
Yeah, it's an interesting question to me. I want to put at least one offensive lineman on my Offensive Player of the Year award, but who do you do? Do you do Sewell, who is the heart of that offense?
Yes.
Or do you do Thuney, whose ability to play multiple positions has dramatically improved the Chiefs over the last few weeks?
That's tricky. I would probably lean for Sewell, considering what he means, considering the things the team tries to do to feature him and make a star out of him kind of indicates what the Lions think of him.
I mean, I'd love to do both of them, but there's also Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry and Jamar Chase and George Kittle and
Barrow and the 2 guys at the top that Aaron's.
I'm just thinking for Offensive Player of the Year.
Oh, OPOY,
yeah. All right, I forgot the sponsor at the start of the show.
Hit it.
Underdog Fantasy, folks.
Yes.
There's only a couple of weeks left of the regular season, but there's still the playoffs, and it's a really good time to play Underdog Fantasy, which is the easiest place to play fantasy sports and the fastest growing app in the industry. And it really is fun. It's just over-unders, folks, and you pick the right ones, you parlay them together, you win money. It's pretty cool. You want to do it. They offer a new customer FTN special up to $1,000 on your first-time deposit. Just use a deposit match. Use code FTN. Up to $1,000 extra. NFL season is here, and who better to celebrate with than Underdog Fantasy? And again, FTN subscriptions 15% off with code Holiday Edge.
Holiday Edge.
Holiday Edge. That is our holiday special.
Awesome.
All right. That does it for today. Everybody enjoy the weekend. And we will be back here on Monday to review all of Week 17. And by that point, we'll know the Week 18 schedule.
Yeah.
And we'll have 1 week left in the regular season.
And what, if anything, matters?
What, if anything, does matter?
Right.
All right. That's Mike Tanier. I'm Aaron Schatz. We'll talk to you guys Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern live or on your favorite podcast app. So long.